Well, it was a quiet end to the trading week for the Indian equity markets, with markets losing ground across the board. You had the Nifty 50 that dropped about 0.4%, and you had the broader markets that underperformed. You had the mid-cap and the small-cap index losing about 0.9 and 0.8% respectively. Now, most of the selling was in a few pockets, though most sectors ended in the red. You saw the FMCG stocks that underperformed, but you also saw selling in metals as well as public sector banks. Now, banks are going to be in focus over the weekend, of course, because you have 5 banks that will report their earnings for the second quarter. You have the likes of ICICI Bank as well as Kotak Mahindra Bank, IDBI Bank, RBL and Yes Bank all reporting their numbers on Saturday. Bond yields in the US have remained elevated of late, and in fact the 10-year Treasury yield hit that 5% mark, and that is essentially what has resulted in a sell-off in risk assets across the globe. If anything, the Indian equity markets have not fallen to the extent that certain other markets have. Higher bond yields, as you know, prompt risk-off sentiment generally. You have a few names that I'd like to mention in the top gainers on the Nifty 50. You have the likes of Kotak Mahindra Bank, as well as IndusInd Bank, Tata Consultancy Services, SBI Life, as well as Tata Consumer. Just a little over a dozen gainers, most of them losing ground. And the top losers, of course, were in that FMCG pack that I mentioned. ITC disappointing on the margin front, and in fact the PAT missing guidance or expectations as well. Tata Steel losing ground, and HUL reporting the lowest volume growth in as many as 6 quarters, also underperforming in trade today. Divi's Lab as well as BPCL were the other top losers. Now, a few other names that I'll mention from the broader markets. You had Century Textiles that dropped nearly 7% after Q2 loss of about 33 crore rupees. Titagarh Wagons gained another 6% in trade today, and that's because of another order win. You had United Breweries that gained close to 4% despite a decline in profit in the second quarter. And finally, Indraprastha Gas was one of the biggest losers in trade, losing over 10% on news of the potential adoption of the EV policy in New Delhi for the fleet operators, and that is seen as a negative. But all told, it was a quiet end to the trading week. Let's see how we trade at the start of next week.